Fair warning, this video will be contentious. This is going to be a rather long one too, and for that I apologize. But this video is, well, it needs to be made. Wisecrack has been a very irritating channel for me to respond to, as their speaker comes off as an incredibly annoying, condescending, and biased individual with about as much charisma as a tire iron to the groin. His sense of humor is non-existent, and his tactics for almost every video are pretty much the same. The typical Wisecrack video is almost always the same video. You introduce media topic that has nothing to do with politics, then have this spokesman for Wisecrack quote a bunch of philosophers who support his viewpoint without even considering the viewpoints of those who differ from his own, and essentially just sell that as the proper narrative, never once trying to consider the idea that maybe there's more than one way to look at a problem. He has called war a recent phenomenon perpetuated and caused largely by nationalistic ideology. He has claimed the anime One Piece is a story upholding the narrative of nomadic groups fighting against power structures. He has argued that How the Grinch Stole Christmas literally didn't go far enough with its anti-capitalist and consumerist message. And he argued Harry Potter, from its very inception, was always perpetuating a narrative of capitalist ideology that he referred to as sinister. Obviously, I have little to no respect for this channel or this individual, and today we're looking at maybe one of the worst takes of Wisecrack yet, not just in his conclusions, but how he approaches the discussion. Wisecrack seems very intimidated by Professor Jordan B. Peterson, as they've attacked him numerous times in the past in various ways. But today, they will be attacking his stance on Christianity. The name of this video is Jordan Peterson Doesn't Understand Christianity. I would argue that first Wisecrack needs to prove to me they understand Christianity, as Christianity itself is not simply a philosophy, so I was very curious to see how this self-described philosopher plans to approach this topic and be objective. Will he compare Peterson's claim to actual scripture? Will he actually draw from teachings of Christianity and hold them up to Peterson's position on the faith? Or will he simply cherry-pick a bunch of people who don't like Jordan Peterson and use their hearsay to argue against him? We'll find out. Well, let's change my avatar. And now, Wisecrack, do you have time to talk about our Lord and Savior?
Oops, I did it again. Yeah, that's right. I'm back to talk about the public intellectual that our era deserves, Jordan Peterson. Now, in the past, I've looked at his critiques of postmodernism and Marxism, but today, well, let's put on our Sunday best because it's time to take Dr. Peterson to church. Now, that's because in recent years, he's been speaking and writing and tweeting more and more about Christianity, specifically Roman Catholicism. And he's been sort of grafting his political views onto this religious framework.
Wisecrack, I sincerely hope you are not criticizing Peterson for applying his political views to something non-religious, given how you attach the invisible hand market theory to Harry Potter. I don't think you have any room to talk. You are just as guilty of this.
Now, I find it a little bit surprising just because Peterson is a trained psychologist who has often framed his work around detailed logical arguments grounded in scientific reason and not faith. But now he's attacking atheists as another enemy in the ever-expanding culture war.
Read that tweet in its entirety. It was a joke, tongue-in-cheek. Read what he was responding to. It says they are going to be reading Jordan's new book on his wrestling with God, and Jordan is jokingly saying that atheists should look out because the book is going to be Book of the Year. It's a joke, dude. I've yet to see him attack atheists as he was one himself once upon a time. I think he sees some of the more new wave atheists of these days as over the top and destructive to society, but this tweet example you supplied does not provide any attack. This is a poor example of your theory.
You know, it's like first I came for the atheist, they came for the atheist, then I did nothing. Then they came for the weird online Marxist, and I did nothing. Like, he's coming for you next. Now, it's important to note that while Peterson has long discussed religious mythology in both his academic and public work via his Jungian perspective, in recent years, there's been a shift, and now he's talking about it from a position of personal faith, and has even called for young men to go back to church.
Take me to church, I worship like a dog in the sky.
And this seems to be part of a larger turn in which practitioners of what we might call a certain online logical conservatism are heading back to religion, and in particular, really traditional forms of Christianity. This includes both people like Peterson and edgelord hipsters like the host of the podcast Red Scare. Please don't tell them I said that, because they legitimately scare me.
What's the joke there? Are you scared of them because they call themselves a Red Scare and you're a Marxist and thus that phrase is supposed to be associated with your ideals? Or are you saying you're afraid of their beliefs? Or are you saying you're afraid of these two women who run the podcast like they're going to hurt you? What's wrong? What's the joke? I'm almost certain this is a joke, but I don't get the punchline, which is common for Wisecrack now that I think about it.
But it feels a little bit ironic that all of this is occurring at the moment that the Catholic Church has their most progressive pope ever. And we'll talk more about this later. Also, I'm not here to stand up for the Catholic Church. This isn't where Catholic Burns comes out and I'm like, this has all been a front to bring you back to the Holy Roman Church. Not what I'm doing here, just to be clear. So today, I want to look at some of Peterson's recent work and ask, what is it about Christianity he's so attracted to? Is his thought being genuinely shaped by an earnest engagement with Christian theology and spiritual practice? Is he grafting his own ideas onto the framework of religion to expand his own reach and influence? Or is he just looking to do transphobia in pretty rooms with stained glass windows?
And this bit should tell you all you need to know about their motivations and goals. Notice that the title of the video is that Jordan Peterson doesn't understand Christianity, but now he's saying he wants to know what it is about traditional Christianity that Jordan Peterson likes so he can just tout transphobia in fancy houses. Let me ask you a very serious question. What if traditional Christian teachings actually do offend you? What if it's not that Jordan Peterson misunderstands the faith, it's just that you don't like what he has to say? Maybe you don't understand the faith yourself. Perhaps I need to turn this on you, sir. Let's see if you understand Christianity. Oh, and at this point, he goes into his stupid ad plug. I'm not doing that. We're skipping that. It's the only part of the video I'm going to skip.
Okay, before we get into it, I have a confession to make. This might come as a shock to some of you, but I'm bald. Now, while there's no going back for me, I know that not every guy out there dreams of rocking the raw dome. But since 2 out of 3 men will experience male pattern baldness of some kind by the time they're 35, if you're in the same boat that I was in college, you might feel like there's no other choice. But that's where you would be wrong, my friends, since Keeps is here to help. Now, Keeps is an online subscription service that makes it easy and more affordable for men to treat their male pattern baldness from the comfort of their home. Now, with Keeps, you can get clinically proven treatments to address hair loss and boost hair regrowth, delivered right to your door. Now, Keeps treatment plans are personalized to address your unique needs and recommended by a licensed medical provider. And as you can see, it comes in discreet, unlabeled packaging, Who knows what's in here? It could be anything. And you never have to worry about running out, as your subscription gives you the choice to have your box shipped every 3, 6, or 12 months. And the best thing is that Keeps actually works. And don't just take it from me. Look at the over 4,500 5-star reviews. So why not join the hundreds of thousands of men who've tried Keeps and given it more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors? If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/wisecrack. That's KEEPS.com/wisecrack. Thanks for letting me make that confession, guys. It really felt like I was back at church. But now let's get back to the show. Okay, let's jump in because today I'm going to take a philosophical and even theological look at Jordan Peterson's religious turn. Part of the reason that Peterson's religious inclinations are interesting to me as a philosophy person is that, according to Tim Lott, who's pretty pro-Peterson, he is a Christian, but more on the pattern of existential Christians, such as Soren Kierkegaard or Paul Tillich, than anything to be found in the Midwest Bible Belt. You probably know at this point, friends, that Kierkegaard's kind of my guy. And I also enjoy the Midwest. Lott goes on to write that Peterson is not, rather surprisingly, only a philosophical Christian. When I ask him whether he actually believes that Jesus physically rose from the dead, he is unable to answer. Let me know in the comments if you think Jesus physically rose from the dead. That sounds like a fun call to action. So if Peterson is supposedly an existential Christian, like my friend Kierkegaard, and an explicitly philosophical Christian, then I feel like analyzing this philosophically tinged faith is very much in my wheelhouse. All that to say is you can trust me right now. Normally you don't. Normally I'm a little dangerous, but today we can trust each other.
You know what, all pretenses aside, I don't trust you. And anyone with a grain of common sense and the ability to think critically shouldn't trust you. In fact, the very idea that you're saying this does indeed indicate that you are not someone worth trusting, because a trustworthy individual usually does not have to say, hey, you can trust me, guys. Their history should speak for themselves. Their actions should be all you need to say. You're the same person who listened to the line, maybe Christmas means a little bit more, and said that wasn't conclusive enough to understand what Christmas actually meant and how the Grinch stole Christmas. You're the person who tried to argue that you could understand Harry Potter and its sinister themes through the invisible hand market economic principle. Right, yes, you use an economic principle to argue how Harry Potter was sinister. You, sir, will twist, stretch, and utterly damage any form of credibility you have and any theory you can get your hands on to suit your narrative. You're a propagandist more than you are a philosopher, and propagandists are the definition of untrustworthy. So no, sir, I don't trust you.
I'm going to look at a few clips from various videos and lectures, along with some of his recent spicy tweets. Now, like the previous Jordan Peterson videos we did, I watched a ton of stuff. I have a document with way too much info in it, so I'm really going to narrow it down. And we did a whole video series on the book of Exodus, but I only watched a little bit of it because I didn't want to pay money to the Daily Wire. But if you do want more of this stuff, I could maybe do an outtakes episode of Wisecrack Live that you could check out. Okay, I want to start by looking at a video that Peterson put out relatively recently where he offers some unasked for advice to the Christian church that's specifically focused on the idea that the fellas need to get themselves to mass immediately.
When they are children, boys are hectored for their toy preferences, which often include toy weapons such as guns, and their more boisterous playing style, as boys require active rough and tumble play, even more than girls, for whom it is also a necessity.
Okay, I'll stop there, but the point he's making is that boys specifically need to play with toy guns and just beat the shit out of each other, and that our society has made us docile little beta cucks or something like that. And it's interesting that so early in a video that's supposed to be about the church, he's just falling into these pretty played out gender dynamics. Doesn't feel very good.
Wow. Okay. I mean, thank you for proving how untrustworthy you are. So that's not what Peterson said in that clip. He said that young boys tend to partake in more aggressive and physical forms of play. They play with toy weapons and have more combative styles of play because of their psychological dispositions. This is proven in psychology. He even said girls do this too, just to a much lesser extent. Following that, he explains that the natural inclination for boys to play in roughhouse is being turned into a negative that society is trying to do away with, telling boys that play is not good and that docile silence and obedience is preferable. He goes on to offer 3 accusations thrown at young boys and children at large to harm them and demoralize them into this state of obedience. Guilt used to make them feel lesser and ashamed. In fact, 2 of the 3 accusations have nothing to do with gender at all. And you skip over all that. All that stuff I'm talking about is what he talks about after this. You skip over it. You ignore it and simply talk it down without even giving it a chance. You know what, guys? I'm going to do what Wisecrack won't. I will leave a link to Peterson's full video in the description. But just to prove that Wisecrack is misleading you, I will play what Peterson says next after this cutoff. Here you go.
When they are children, boys are hectored for their toy preferences, which often include toy weapons such as guns, and their more boisterous playing style, as boys require active rough and tumble play, even more than girls, for whom it is also a necessity. When in grade school, boys are admonished, shamed, and controlled in a very similar manner by those who think that play is unnecessary, particularly if it's competitive, and who value a docile, harmless obedience above all. Shades of Dolores Umbridge.
So, forgive me, Wisecrack. I thought you said I could trust you. I see you lied. Good thing I didn't trust you to begin with.
But he's going to keep talking about this. But I just wanted to note that that's 2 minutes into the video. He's already going down this path.
You might think that I'm overstating the case. Think again, sunshine.
He says, think again, sunshine. I'm going to just right now, I'm going to rewind 2 seconds so I can see him say it again.
Think again, sunshine.
Do I even need to criticize this? Do I actually need to? Let me actually, you know what? Let me actually explain this for you folks who don't understand the problem here. I have watched the original video that Wisecrack is using here. The part that he started at the very beginning, was at the 2 minutes and 14 seconds mark in the video, meaning over 2 minutes of preamble and explanation was skipped over. And you know what? Maybe that's okay. Sometimes we do need to skip over the preamble. I get that. But then the portion that he jumps to next for this was at 5 minutes and 13 seconds. An almost 3-minute jump. Now, some of you might not take issue with this, but I do. Guys, seriously, this is dishonest. Why? Because think about it for a second. First of all, he's not even skipping over all that to a finalized point of Jordan Peterson or to give context. He's jumping to it to make a joke at Jordan Peterson's expense. Look, one of the reasons I play the full video for people I respond to is because I believe in transparency. I want to make sure all the context is provided. That way, no one can accuse me of avoiding or skipping information. What my opposition wants to say, I allow them to say. Every detail is shown so that this way no one can claim that I didn't give them a fair chance. Even Wisecrack deserves this. I will play their full video other than their little ad plug, and you can go watch their video for full context. But Jordan Peterson? They were not only willing to jump 3 minutes ahead of what he had to say, skipping out on much of the context of his issues and what he had to say, but decided to pick back up on a clip specifically to laugh at him. It was out of context, it was shown without having first viewed the full basis of his issue, and it was mean-spirited. This might have been excusable if they linked his video in the description for you to watch it yourself, but he did not. He is well aware that most of his audience does not watch Peterson, will not watch Peterson, and will simply take him at his word and laugh like trained hyenas at his childish attempt to slander a man far more intelligent than he is. This underhanded display is nothing new from Wisecrack, but it is always distasteful. Guys, I'm being dead serious. If you can't see the problem here, we've got a lot to talk about, all right? We've got a lot to get through.
He goes on here to talk a little bit more about the way in which the Christian church should represent a sort of home of masculinity, of male culture, of domination. So let's watch him talk about that a little more, and we'll dive a little bit deeper.
The Christian church is there to remind people, young men included, and perhaps even first and foremost, that they have a woman to find, a garden to walk in, a family to nurture, an ark to build, a land to conquer, a ladder to heaven to build, and the utter terrible catastrophe of life to face stalwartly in truth, devoted to love, and without fear.
The terrible catastrophe of life. So let's, think about this, right? He says that the church is there to remind primarily men that I like how the first thing he says is they have a woman to find, as if faith is primarily about marriage, a garden to walk in, a family to nurture, an ark to build, a land to conquer. So we have a sort of, you got to fetch your woman, and then you got to go, I guess, do some colonization there.
I would like to point out that, again, he skipped ahead. Remember that think again, sunshine portion? That was at 5 minutes and 13 seconds. The portion he now picks up at is at 6 minutes and 52 seconds. Not a big jump this time, only less than 2 minutes, but it still demonstrates his inability to be objective or fair. But you know what? I already talked about that. Let's ignore that and discuss Peterson's claims versus what this idiot says they are. Peterson says that the church is meant to remind young people, including men, and maybe even more importantly young men, that they have a woman to find, a garden to walk in, a family to nurture, an ark to build, a land to conquer, a ladder to heaven to build, and the catastrophe of life to face stalwartly in truth and love without fear. So, of these things, what does Wisecrack hone in on? The finding of a woman and the conquering of land. Why? Because he can imply that Christianity is supposedly all about getting married and that it is about colonization. None of these things are what Peterson was talking about. Peterson was using biblical analogy and metaphor to explain the role of men as outlined by the Christian faith. First, finding a woman means that men should be proactive in seeking relationships rather than being submissive, just as God encouraged Adam to pick a partner in the Garden of Eden. A garden to walk in means that they have a duty to care for and be part of the world rather than hide from it, as Adam and Eve walked in the garden with the Lord. A family to nurture means that they have a family to care for and provide for, like Abraham cared for his own family and Jacob for his. An ark to build means to have a job and to have a direction rather than to be aimless and living in sin and sloth like the people of the earth did in Noah's day. A land to conquer, since you didn't seem to understand it, Wisecrack, means to have a dream or goal and pursue it like the Israelites conquering Canaan. And note, the Israelites conquering Canaan was not a colonization. It was not colonizing anything. So, no, you're wrong about him saying this was colonization. A ladder to heaven, or a ladder to heaven to build, means to build a relationship with God and heaven so as to be right with our spiritual Father. And face the horrors of this world bravely with truth and love and without fear means to stand against the constant terrors of reality without flinching, something Christ called us to do many times. Nothing he says implies that women are trophies to be won, that Christianity is only about marriage, or that it is all about colonization. Had you any understanding of biblical history, theology, or literacy, you'd know exactly what he's saying. Maybe before you go figuring out Jordan Peterson's Christian understanding, you might want to take a few lectures at Sunday school yourself.
But there's an article about Peterson and the way he writes about gender, male desire, and femininity from a writer named Ashley Lenz, who, as far as I understand it, is a Catholic writer, so is coming at this from a Christian perspective.
Interesting. Would you care to tell us where this article is from? Care to tell us that? Oh, don't worry, I'll share it with you. This website is femcatholic.com. where the main page slogan reads, quote, "We believe the greatest untapped resource in the world and in the church is women." Yes, a supposed Christian website which says the greatest untapped resource for the world and church is not God, not Jesus, not salvation, not the gospel, but women. I can already tell this will not be a Christian-based website, but a feminist-based website that uses the Bible to support itself. I would gladly read the article he's citing for context, but it's behind a paywall. And sorry, I'm not giving them my money, just as you don't give the Daily Wire your money. But let's see what they have to say in your video, shall we?
She says, there is nothing in Peterson's writing that suggests that women are much more than commodified bodies which placate male desire, inspire male violence, or validate male status and success.
You know what? I give this writer real credit. This is an excellent work of linguistics and diction. Notice how she phrased this. There is nothing in Jordan Peterson's writing that suggests women are much more than, and then goes off on what she thinks Jordan Peterson is saying about women. Notice that she did not say Jordan Peterson just thinks that women are blank, and she doesn't say Jordan Peterson's writing suggests that women are blank. Because if she said those things, then she has to provide quotes that support that. But here, she doesn't really have to. She's trying to encourage us to search the book to find anything to refute her, which is a pretty tall order. However, this is like saying to someone on a trial for murder that nothing in the defendant's text history suggests that he's innocent of the crime. You're taking one piece of literature from the man and trying to use that to formulate an overall opinion he has, especially since you're taking it from a book, 12 Rules for Life, which he wrote before his big conversion. But you'll note that in the screenshot, after the highlighted portion, the author makes a slip. She says that nowhere in the book does Peterson say that men should demonstrate an attitude of love to the females they encounter. And you're partially correct. He does not go into specifics on love in the book, but that's largely because one would expect love to be obvious in a relationship. The book is on advice for how one conducts themselves and how to improve their lives, and also educating on what women will be more interested in for men. But to prove he does believe love is important and godly, here's a clip.
I've thought too that love in some sense is the grace of God, is that if you're in a relationship with someone that's characterized by love, you see each other in some deep sense, and you can't see other people like that because you don't have the ability. But it's not like the love is a delusion. It's the opposite of a delusion.
Exactly. And that's the interesting thing. What they're robbing people of is the most beautiful thing, which is the ability to emote for somebody else and to invest yourself in something.
Well, and also to live in that condition. I mean, if you're around someone that you love and that love defines the relationship, there isn't any better thing you can do.
No.
And so then to minimize that, to call it some sort of biological or biochemical aberration, which is the worst form of unconscionable reductionism, is to reduce the highest possible goal to something that's nothing but like a trivial consequence of some underlying materiality. It's appalling, and it's really demoralizing.
And the interesting thing here, and you might have seen this if you watched our previous Peterson videos, is he's very critical of the idea that in his mind, postmodernist and Marxist and leftist and all this sort of stuff only see the world in terms of hierarchies of power. But as Lenz sees it, that's basically what he's doing in the way he talks about Christianity. So she writes, Peterson's work not only describes, but actually endorses these systems of dominance, neglecting the fact that Christ swallowed up those kinds of hierarchies, making the first last and the last first, inverting and subverting the sinful way that men and women have sought to remake the world through power and violence.
Another prime example of your dishonesty and omission of information. You say that he sees hierarchy in Christianity, but that's not what is being talked about in the article. Read what you did not highlight. Lenz here is discussing Jordan Peterson's discussion on lobsters. Had you read the book, you'd know that Peterson compares human society and social interaction to that of lobsters, since lobsters and humans have a common ancestor. He points out that male lobsters who carry themselves with pride, who are strong, and who do not back down are often the ones who get mates and get food, while the weaker lobsters who slump around and flee from confrontation often do not get mates and get less food. This portion of the book was on encouraging men to walk with their back straight and shoulders square so to look more confident, proud, and strong, because by exuding an air of confidence and strength, you will help show others that you are someone to be respected, to become the victorious lobster, as he says. Lenz, very incorrectly, tries to suggest that this is endorsing social dominance hierarchy in humans and says Christ did not condone such things. And that is true. Christ did not condone social hierarchies of this nature. But Peterson is not suggesting the establishment of a social hierarchy, only using the analogy of an animal social hierarchy to encourage us to be more confident in ourselves and walk and carry ourselves with pride and austerity. He's not saying that we need to adopt a social hierarchy. He's telling young men, do you want to be more desirable? Do you want to be more liked by people around you? Do you want to be more confident? Then start by carrying yourself with confidence, because quite often those who carry themselves with confidence and appear confident will be perceived as confident. This is ridiculous.
So again, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that it's so important for Peterson that his new favorite thing, Christianity, is about men exhibiting some sort of divine power when, right here, a Catholic writer sees the faith as doing something completely different to that.
Maybe because you're quoting a feminist Catholic article writer rather than the Bible? Here, I'll show you how. I'll show you how to do it. Corinthians 16:13, be careful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Oof, well, that seemed to support Jordan. Let's try another one. 1 Corinthians 11:3, but I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. Ooh, supporting a hierarchy in the household. Wow, that's not helping your case either. Maybe you should break out a Bible.
Now, he goes on and kind of wraps up with a call to action of sorts about what he thinks that we, especially we young men, are supposed to do, and in particular, what people that are Christians, that are religious, are supposed to do. Also, if you're a church leader, a priest, a pastor, anything of that sort, first of all, thanks for watching the channel. Second of all, let us know, if you wanted Jordan Peterson's advice on how you should do your job.
I'd accept his advice over yours. He seems to know what he's talking about more so than you do.
Quit fighting for social justice. Quit saving the bloody planet. Attend to some souls. That's what you're supposed to do. That's your holy duty. Do it now.
Do it now. Quick question for everyone watching. You might notice that behind Jordan Peterson, there is a bunch of chopped wood. Please let me know if you think that masculine powerhouse Jordan Peterson chopped that wood himself. Maybe our editors could even zoom in on that wood right now, and you can ask yourself if he chopped that wood. But there's a lot going on here, okay? So now we're diving in.
I almost have no words to say. We're only 10 minutes into this 36-minute video, and you have shown me how you have no integrity, no honesty, no interest in objectivity or fairness. You have no understanding of Peterson, the Bible, or what he's saying, and you don't want to understand. That's the big kicker. You don't even want to understand. You want to shame him. That's what this whole video is. You just want to shame him because he has more followers, he is more popular, and more intelligent. You hate him because he's what you wish you could be for your side of the political spectrum. I know this because you've stopped this video twice just to make fun of him. And this time, not even for what he said or how he said it, but just for something in the background of his video. You're not arguing his point. You're not discussing the point he's making. You're attacking him because you think, stupid Jordan Peterson, you think he's strong enough to break that timber? You think he actually chopped that wood? Really? You're looking at the wood in his cabin and mocking the idea that Peterson couldn't chop all that wood himself because he's not physically strong enough to. You know what? Here's another Bible verse for you. Proverbs 18:2. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. I wonder who that could be talking about.
He says you got to stop fighting for social justice. He says you got to quit saving the bloody planet. Tend to some souls. That's what you're supposed to do. And I want to go a little point by point here, and I want to talk in particular about Catholic social teaching and Catholicism, not just because I was forced into that as a child, but because Peterson himself has said that, quote, I think that Catholicism, that's as sane as people can get. So he's basically saying that Catholicism is the most sane version of faith, of religion, of church. And then he's inspired by that to say, stop fighting for social justice, quit saving the planet. But according to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, a conference I've never been invited to, a basic moral test is how our most vulnerable members are faring. In a society marred by deepening divisions between rich and poor, our tradition recalls the story of the Last Judgment and instructs us to put the needs of the poor and vulnerable first. The teachings of the church itself is saying that taking care of the division between the rich and the poor, fighting for the poor and vulnerable first, is a good thing to do. And they talk about solidarity as well. I won't get into the whole thing, but the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has solidarity as another one of their big principles. And solidarity with people around the world, solidarity with people struggling from violence and conflict.
All right. This is one of the major problems of the video, so I'm going to go ahead and say this out front so you guys recognize it. What Wisecrack and many of the people he's going to quote here are trying to do when they say social justice is they're trying to equate social justice to caring for the poor. That's what they're trying to do here. For most of this video, when they mention social justice, they are trying to conflate social justice with just caring for the poor. And so they're going to say that when Jordan Peterson says that social justice is not Christian, they're going to say, what, you're saying caring for the poor isn't Christian, but that's something that's important to Christianity. See what I mean? Now, let me say this for the record. Social justice is not the same as caring for the poor and destitute. Social justice has been, and will always be, about seeking social reform to cater to the self-proclaimed victims of society, not about generosity to the poor and needy. In my experience, most advocates of social justice are not people who would give out of their own pocket to feed a poor homeless man, but will instead go to Twitter and complain that the billionaire in Washington isn't giving up all of their own money for the poor. Besides, that's not what he's saying anyway. Peterson is calling out priests, pastors, and church leaders who spend whole sermons lecturing their congregation on social justice issues rather than on the Bible, on leaders who will encourage political and socioeconomic lectures and lessons rather than sermons involving salvation. That's why he ends his statement by saying for them to deal with lost souls, as that is what they're charged to do. Let me be very clear. The church was never meant to be a political body. I know that that's what it kind of turned into in the past, because after the fall of Rome, we needed something to unite Europe and the divided kingdoms and nations, and that's kind of what the church turned into. But that was never meant to be its purpose. The church was never meant to be a political body. Okay, that's never what it was supposed to be. When you look at social justice, it isn't about taking care of the poor. The Bible does encourage us to take care of the poor, to help the poor. It does encourage that. But that's not what social justice is.
Now, he also says that we got to quit saving the bloody planet. Well, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, which again, I've not been invited. If they wanted to invite me, I would attend.
Why on earth would they invite you? You're not a bishop, you're not ordained, and you have no fundamental understanding of Christian doctrine, as you're proving right now. Why on earth would they want to invite you?
So they say we show our respect for the Creator by our stewardship of creation. Care for the earth is not just an Earth-based slogan. It is a requirement of our faith. We are called to protect people on the planet, living our faith in relationship with all of God's creation. This environmental challenge has fundamental moral and ethical dimensions that cannot be ignored. So again, big boy Jordan, who says that social justice is bad and environmentalism bad. Well, the church itself says these things are good, which, and we're going to keep this question open, makes me wonder again, is he approaching this tradition with openness? Is he engaging with the theology here? Or is he just trying to find a big, powerful system of belief to graft onto? Who knows?
Jordan Peterson, when he told the church leaders to stop saving the bloody planet, was not saying we shouldn't care about the environment. He was saying that the church's main goal should be to reach souls, save people, and spread their faith. He even said in the video you keep chopping up to avoid giving context to that, the church and man must work together to better his relationship to this family, to the community, and to the world at large.
We want to call you to the highest purpose of your life. We want your time and energy and effort and your will and your goodwill. We want to work with you to make things better, to produce life more abundant for you and for your wife and children and for your community and your country and the world.
Of course, we are called to care for the world, but Peterson is saying he's sick of seeing sermons that lecture us about global warming and environmentalism and not about the actual teachings of Christ. This is why you're not looking to the scripture, Wisecrack. You're looking to everything else. You won't quote scripture because Jordan Peterson says the most important thing for the church to do is to save souls. And is that supported by scripture? Let's find out. Matthew 10:28 has Jesus saying, "And do not fear those that can kill the body but cannot kill the soul, but rather the one who can destroy both body and soul in hell," implying that the soul is at risk. We know this thanks to Romans 3:23, which says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." We have all sinned. We have all fallen short of God's expectations, and as a result, we are at risk of the fires of hell, which destroy our body and soul. So we need salvation, which is where John 3:16 is so important. "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." Now, notice here, what I've just said is the fundamental truth of Christian faith. It has nothing to do with social justice. It has nothing to do with environmentalism. And before anyone says, "But the Bible encourages us to give to the poor and needy," yes, it does. But our own generosity and spirit and desire is the key there. We must give generously by our own desire and spirit, not by government mandate. Think about it like this. If the government takes 30% of your tax dollars and gives it to the poor, that is not keeping with God's commands, for you're not choosing to give that money of your own spirit. You're letting the government do it for you, and that's not a conscious or personal act. God called us to have a personal desire to help others, to love others. If you're just telling the government, you need to do it for me or you need to do it yourselves, that's not demonstrating a personal desire to help others. That's showing you want Big Brother to do it for you.
And wildly enough, even a writer for the American Conservative, which is a publication I have now read, found Peterson's take on church to be seriously lacking, writing, "If some guy mouths off to you at a bar, you can go out in the parking lot and kick his ass. That's what an alpha male would do. And maybe that's the land you're supposed to conquer. Who knows? Either way, it takes guts. But do you know what takes even more guts? Loving your enemy, turning the other cheek, praying for those who persecute you." And he's writing, I think, in direct response to that video. So a conservative Christian guy writing for the American Conservative found this to be a little bit much.
Again, dishonesty. Read the next paragraph. Read the next paragraph. Don't want to? I will. Honestly, I don't think Dr. Jordan Peterson is trying to upstage Jesus. I think he's an intelligent, compassionate man who genuinely wants to help youngsters put their lives on track. But I also think his followers expect too much of him. He's the dad of the internet. His disciples want him to validate Christianity for them. If he can believe it, so can they. And so, ever since he started talking about converting, they've cast him as a kind of prophet in waiting. He'll be the next St. Augustine. His conversion will change the church. He'll make Christianity great again. I think Dr. Peterson is trying to live up to those expectations, and it's not good for anyone, least of all Peterson. And I agree with this. He's not here saying that Peterson doesn't understand Christianity. He's saying that Peterson is being put on a pedestal by his audience that he doesn't need to be on. That quote you highlighted, I'm not sure what it's in reference to, and you just say you think it has to do with the video? Well, I'd like it if you read the full article or at least linked it or something to provide context, but you won't. You just highlight a random comment and say, yeah, that's obviously his criticism of Jordan Peterson's statement in that video. Well, was it? I don't know. He doesn't mention the video in that highlighted portion. What's he talking about? What's he alluding to? Could you give us the article to read? Would you grow an intellectually honest bone in your body and actually give us the context of this article you're citing? Otherwise, I have no idea what it's in reference to.
Also, just note that thus far, I've quoted the American conservative, I've quoted a Catholic writer. I'm not just like saying, oh, Marx wouldn't agree with that. I'm meeting him where he is.
You have quoted two pieces. One from a feminist Catholic with a bone to pick with Peterson, and another from an unnamed author of a random article with an out-of-context quote. Oh yeah, you're totally being fair here, bro. You're totally meeting him where he is. You won't even pull out a Bible.
Okay, but, in fairness, our man isn't just recording direct-to-camera manifestos to the church like he's Martin Luther with a YouTube account. He's also put together a crack team of experts to create a full video course on the book of Exodus, which is in the Bible. And now, I'm gonna be honest, I said this before, I didn't watch the whole thing because A, it's like 30 hours, and B, because it's behind a paywall. So I just want to look at a little bit of it that was available for free. To get started with, I just want to note that he brings a bunch of professors to the table with him, and I do respect that. We get some philosophers, some theologians, but there's one in particular that stood out to me, so let's just watch this for a second.
Well, my name is Douglas Headley, and I'm a fellow at the University of Cambridge, a fellow of Clare College, and I teach the philosophy of religion.
So, do you know where this guy's from? If you pause it right now and let me know if you think you know the connection I'm about to make.
We'll settle an argument that has raged for centuries. Which is better, the Bible or the Quran?
The Quran.
So that one.
This guy was on Kunk on Earth. Have you all seen that show? So yeah, now those universes have officially mixed. The Jordan Peterson universe and the Kunk on Earth universe. So I wanted to give you that as a gift.
The part of the manner in which God is portrayed throughout the biblical corpus, but I would say in traditions around the world, as that phenomenon that alerts you to your own misbehavior.
Okay, so there's some elements to this video which I actually think are cool. I'm being very serious because you have a table of presumably smart people, including Dennis Prager, who are reading very carefully through a text together and talking about it. And I don't know, there's a lot of versions of this I would like to see. It's interesting how much Jordan Peterson talks, as there's other people there who are presumably experts in this stuff. But he says a thing that I think is kind of instructive. So let's watch that right now.
And it is really something, again, I really learned from Jung, contra Freud in some real sense, is that, and contra Nietzsche, who believed that maybe we could create our own values, is that there's something within that is transcendent because it isn't only in you, it's in everyone in some fundamental and real sense, plus it's eternal in some fundamental and real sense, and it calls you on your misbehavior.
Okay, so I'll stop there. He says some interesting stuff if you want to keep watching, but he describes God as the phenomenon that alerts you to your own misbehavior, and we're going to see this flesh out a little bit more later, but he frames God as sort of like an individual process of conscience or morality, the primary role of which is to let you know if you've been naughty or nice. So basically Santa Claus, except that he can send you to hell if he wants. And I'm gonna flesh this out later, but the way he talks about God makes it sound as if there's a vertical relationship between the individual and the divine thing, and the divine thing is like good, bad, do this, not that. And while that might sound correct to a child in Sunday school or something, I think that this leads to problems down the road. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Now this is very telling. Let's start with the part about you saying God is like Santa Claus, according to Peterson, where he determines who is naughty and nice and can send people to hell if he wants. This is a flagrant misunderstanding of God. Let me explain it for you clearly, okay? I'm going to break this down. God has a set standard. As the Alpha and Omega and the creator of all things, as the only perfect being in existence, God's perfect standard is what he holds us to, as outlined in the law of Moses. We cannot meet this standard. It is impossible to do so. We cannot be perfect. And because of this, we are separated from God, and eternal separation from God is hell. God knows this. And that's the reason Jesus' sacrifice and resurrection is so important. Because we can't meet God's standard, Jesus connects us to God for us. We don't have to be perfect because Jesus is our salvation. Hell is not a place God just wants to send us to. He's not just out there saying, this guy's good, he'll get to heaven. This guy's bad, he's going to hell. He's going to hell too. I think I'll send you to hell too. No, he's not doing that. We're already bound for hell by our imperfections, and God is trying to get us out of hell. God is desperately trying to save souls. He's desperately trying to reach people and say, please, I don't want you going that way. Accept the forgiveness I offer. Accept the love and forgiveness of Jesus Christ that I offer and come back to me so you don't end up there. This is not about God saying, I think I'll send this person to hell. I think I'll send that person to hell. This person can go to heaven, but this person's going to hell. He doesn't do that. He is trying to get as many people out of hell as he can. We have to accept that forgiveness. And Peterson even understands that. Now, next, let's keep moving. Next, you say Peterson believes in a vertical relationship with God and the individual. Yes, he does. Why? Because that's exactly what Christianity is. A vertical relationship between God and man. And it's biblical. We can look to the Bible. John 15:5. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Basically saying that we are connected to God like branches to a vine. Whoever abides in the Lord and is connected to him will bear much fruit, and you can't do anything apart from me. Let's do another one. John 15:15. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. Again, Jesus is saying this. Jesus is saying, I don't consider you servants. I consider you close. I consider you friends, because all I've heard from the Father I've made known to you. I'm sharing information about the Father. I want you to know the Father, God. Let's do another one. James 4:8. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. That first part is very telling. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. And then let's do one more. Revelation 3:20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me. God is saying, I want a relationship with you. I'm standing at the door and knocking, saying, hey, I'm here. I want a relationship with you. I want to be close to you. I'm your Father. I'm your Creator. I want to have a relationship with you. I want to be connected to you. And Peterson understands that. He knows that there is some kind of connection between the individual self and heaven and God wants that personal relationship. God is all about it. A vertical relationship is what God wants with us. That is what sets Christianity apart from so many other faiths, because God came to us to save us. Not us trying to reach him, but him reaching out to us. How can you claim Jordan Peterson doesn't understand the faith when you think this is a problem? You'd say it's something that sounds right in Sunday school, but you think it has problems later on? What problem? And how is that a misunderstanding? Do you even understand the faith you're talking about? All this seems to indicate to me is that you just don't like what he said, which is personal for you. That doesn't indicate he doesn't understand the gospel.
Because compassion, as far as I can tell, that overarching compassion is particularly appropriate when it's directed towards that which is truly helpless. But if it starts to be directed as if towards infants to those who could be competent, then it starts to become destructive.
I just want you to note, he called compassion destructive. He said compassion is good when it is directed towards those who are truly helpless, which does seem to be in line with the Catholic social teaching stuff on social justice we talked about before, but then says we can't be compassionate towards those that are competent. That seems a little bit dangerous.
No, you simpleton. He's saying that compassion to the helpless is good, but when you treat competent people like infants, you discover it's destructive. Let me explain it to you. If you infantilize people who should be treated with competence, then you teach them to be dependent. You teach them that they are entitled to be given success rather than earn it. You create a society of adults who behave like children, throwing tantrums because they don't get their way. That's why he said if you treat someone with compassion like you would an infant to someone who is competent, it invites destruction. If you would play the full clip for context, I'd like to hear what part of Exodus he's talking about. I find this endlessly fascinating because the funny thing is, I agree with it, but I want to know what aspect of Exodus he's talking about. More than likely, he's talking about the trials in the desert, but that's just me.
But let's keep it moving, because he brings up someone who's very important to me in the next clip.
To me, faith is something like the willingness to take a risk based on a presumption. And maybe the presumption is, well, truth will set you free. It's like, well, tell the truth and see what happens. It's going to get you in a lot of trouble. The evidence that aggregates around you if you tell the truth to the degree that you can isn't that this is going to be the easy path forward. You have to decide. This is something Kierkegaard stressed, right? Is that you have to decide certain things as preconditions for action, independent in some real sense of the evidence. And that's the faith. And this is when Abraham, for example, in his great adventure, he follows God's call out of the safety of the tent. The faith is to heed the call of adventure, even though he's got everything in some sense that you'd need if you're only interested in hedonistic gratification. But there's something beyond that, and it's faith that allows you to make those decisions to step into the unknown future.
So I'm going to say this. I think what he just said right there, and really clue in, stop doing your other thing. I think that what he says there isn't wrong. Like this idea that faith is a willingness to take a risk based on a presumption, the way in which faith is connected to decision. I think that's really spot on with what Kierkegaard says in a way. So Kierkegaard, in case you haven't heard me talk about this before, his whole deal was that faith can't be a matter of the intellect, right? We don't have faith in something because we're logically convinced. We don't have faith in something because we're born into a tradition. Faith is a matter of making an existential decision, making a leap of faith, and not knowing how it's going to work out. This is why Kierkegaard's sort of the forefather of existentialism, because he's saying there's no magical, objective essence to this thing. You have to have faith to believe in the thing. And this is why I thought there was a logical paradox at the heart of Christianity. And so I'm both interested by the fact that he brings up Kierkegaard here, but I'm also a little bit confused because in other points, and we'll look to this later, Peterson speaks with, I don't know if like hubris is the right word, but he leans into objectivity when talking about faith. He leads into like certain logical certainties, which is the opposite of what Kierkegaard was doing. So Kierkegaard's whole thing was that during his era, churches and people that were Christians evacuated everything of faith because it was just a matter of logical propositions, and the church was connected with society. And I'm a Lutheran because I'm born in Denmark at this time, but no one's relating to their individual faith in a passionate way. And I don't really see so much of that in the other stuff that he's saying, but wanted to bring that up. And, he later goes on to say that truth is an adventure, another thing I think that Kierkegaard and a lot of philosophers would agree with. And in this sense, he's sort of at least flirting with the idea that there's something existential in terms of how faith affects our subjectivity. And I had to say that because I just don't want to be accused of piling on and shitting on the guy, even a broken clock. Even a broken clock.
Two things. One, would you show the clip of Peterson being objective about faith? You say he'll do that later on, but I want you to show it. Stop muddying the waters and let's actually hear it so we know what he's actually going to say. Two, no, you're not just shitting on the guy. Not at all. Two, nah, man, you're not just shitting on the guy. That's totally not why you mock the background of his video saying he couldn't have chopped all those logs because he's not strong enough. Nor is it why you mocked the memeable way he said something. Nor is it why you muddied the waters by calling him transphobic right from the offset. Nah, friend, your whole goal is to shit on him. And by the end of this video, we'll see that come full circle.
There's one more clip I want to watch from this, and it's a very long video. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. I guess it's no Killers of the Flower Moon.
I was looking at the Sermon on the Mount the other day, and Christ says in the Sermon on the Mount that those who are poor in spirit are blessed. There's many people who are blessed, but the poor in spirit are blessed. And the question is, what does that mean? And it means something like those who have been brought low enough to be humble enough to be ready to receive, to be ready to receive.
To be ready to receive.
And I think that's what's being echoed here, is that's part of the reflection of Moses' nakedness.
That's the best explanation I ever heard.
Dennis Prager, by the way. It's the PragerU guy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It took me only 40 years to think of that.
That really helps. Because I've never thought, the poor are so special. They're wonderful poor and lousy poor.
No, it's definitely a reference to pride.
Okay, so a couple of things there. One, you'll notice right off the bat that Peterson is quick to read that quote from the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, like, blessed are the poor, as being poor in spirit, and poor in spirit being a process of humility that makes one ready to receive or deserve something else. Then it cuts to Dennis Prager, the guy that runs PragerU, a wonderful online educational resource that's now allowed in many public schools in America. And he's like, yeah, I always wondered, like, why are the poor good? There's lousy poor, whatever. And they quickly evacuate any social meaning of that idea and make the poorness about a certain type of humility. It's just a wild reading. And
Wisecrack, you have no idea what they're talking about. You have no understanding of that passage. You have no biblical literacy with which to understand what is being discussed, and you're so caught up in your own political Marxist ideology, you are incapable of recognizing you're out of your depth. So again, let me break it down. Matthew 5:3, which is what Jordan Peterson is quoting, says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now, what does poor of spirit mean? Dennis Prager admits this passage confused him because he knew that being poor itself was not worthy of blessing. There was definitely wonderful poor people, but there are also lousy poor people. Why was being financially poor worthy of blessing? So Jordan Peterson states correctly that being poor of spirit means that you are humble. You lack the pride and self-aggrandizing attitude that makes you think you are Lord of your life and destiny. Being humble and practicing humility allows you to accept that you are not the king of your life, but rather God is. Blessed are those who are humble, who are lower, who are poor in their own spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Those who lower themselves personally to make room for God and for others in their heart rather than their own spirit will be blessed. You, Wisecrack, can't separate this from a social context. As you admitted, play the clip, he said it.
And they quickly evacuate any social meaning of that idea and make the poorness about a certain type of humility. It's just a wild reading. And
you're very shocked they would disconnect the financially poor and the socially poor from their discussion. Maybe that's because this verse doesn't have to do with financially being poor. It has to do with the poor in spirit, a concept you simply don't comprehend. And to prove that this is more than just my reading, I'm going to quote Albert Barnes' commentary on the verse, as he is a well-regarded theologian and biblical commentator. Quote, "To be poor in spirit is to have a humble opinion of ourselves, to be sensible that we are sinners and have no righteousness of our own, to be willing to be saved only by the rich grace and mercy of God, to be willing to be where God places us, to bear what he lays on us, to go where he bids us, and to die when he commands, to be willing to be in his hands, and to feel that we deserve no favor from him. It is opposed to pride and vanity and ambition." You know, seems to me, based on this clip alone, Jordan Peterson understands Christianity better than you do.
What it makes me think of is a whole tradition in Christianity, Catholicism in particular, that's called liberation theology. And this is basically a bunch of largely Latin American priests who, study theology in Europe, and they come back to Latin America and stuff's not going so well, largely because of stuff that America did in concert with Reagan. We haven't referenced Reagan a lot recently, so Reagan did this.
You're not a philosopher. You're a propagandist and a political mouthpiece. You can't even divorce your political leanings from a video meant to be about faith and theology. You're an embarrassment to intellectual learning.
But one of the most famous members of that movement is Gustavo Gutierrez. And this is how Gutierrez describes some of his work relative to how Christians are meant to treat the poor. He said, "Christians have not done enough in this area of conversion to the neighbor, to social justice, to history. They have not perceived clearly enough yet that to know God is to do justice. They have yet to tread the path that will lead them to seek effectively the peace of the Lord in the heart of social struggle." And I'm only bringing that up to say that there is an entire tradition within Christian theology that connects things like the Sermon on the Mount to the necessity to privilege and take care of the poor and the downtrodden.
Yes, the Bible does teach us to care about the poor and the downtrodden. No one is disputing that. Peterson never said that was bad. In fact, I recall him saying earlier that compassion to the genuinely helpless was a good thing. The verse in question here has nothing to do with caring for the poor. The verse Peterson is talking about doesn't have anything to do with financial struggle or economic poverty. But you want to slam Jordan so much that you will do the most intellectually foolish thing I've ever seen. You run to a very controversial sect called the Liberation Theology movement, a movement that tries to combine Christian doctrine with Marxist socioeconomic principles. Who's trying to inject their politics into religion again? I don't know who. Like, who did you say was injecting their politics into religion? You take a quote from them about caring for the poor, a quote which has nothing to do with the verse Peterson is quoting, and then try to claim that Peterson is wrong about this quote and about the Sermon on the Mount because of what Liberation Theology says about caring for the poor. This is another example of you running to people you think will support your claim rather than working with the text as it is given. Sir, you're a coward. You're terrified to engage with the scripture, with Peterson, and with the discussion. This whole video is a joke. If you really wanted to prove that Peterson didn't understand the scripture, why didn't you go to the passage? Why didn't you analyze it? Why didn't you look to theological commentators and spokesmen on that passage? You don't. You ran to Liberation Theology and didn't even go to their take on the passage. You just decided to take a random quote from them about caring for the poor. It has nothing to do with what Peterson's talking about.
Okay, last video. This is one called Why Should You Go to Church? And in the video, he's talking about what we will lose as a society if we're not going to church, if we're not, activating our faith. I just want to note this is on his YouTube channel, and the first hashtag in the description is hashtag what is a woman, and the second hashtag is Catholicism. So let's watch our first clip from this.
You're going to get rid of that, eh? You're going to get rid of marriage. You're going to get rid of funerals. You're going to get rid of Christmas. You're going to get rid of any sense of sacred time. You're going to dispense with the whole history of what Judeo-Christian thought. You're going to dispense with the idea of the sacred nature of the individual. Like, how far are you willing to go with this? And believe me, that question is right in front of you, because there's a wave of radicals who are asking you at every moment, what makes you so sure that there's a difference between a man and a woman?
Okay, so I think we got him. I think we got it. Jordan Peterson, at the end of the day, this whole edifice around why faith is important, why church is important, why he loves Catholicism so much, is that he wants there to be men and women, and he doesn't want any other categories or anything. He thinks that a wave of radicals wants to ask questions about that. He's just saying it right there. And I do think this deflates, some of the intensity or some of the even supposed earnestness around his engagement with this stuff.
Well, okay. There it is, guys. What's left to be said? It's pretty clear, I think. Jordan Peterson only prescribes to traditional Christian values because he's obsessed with traditional gender binary and doesn't want any LGBTQ stuff muddled in that. Well, you know what? I think Wisecrack figured it out, right? Yep. They figured it out. Sure, you have to ignore the fact that this is the only time he even mentions this topic in this massive video, or the fact that Peterson is simply using that as an example to explain his case, but yeah, you know what? I think Wisecrack is being totally honest here and not being dismissively and disingenuous and completely unfair. Yep, totally. Ugh. This video's hurting me. So, is that what Jordan Peterson was saying? Let's walk back and take a look. Peterson says that without the church, we would inevitably get rid of marriages, funerals, Christmas, sacred time, Judeo-Christian historical understanding and philosophy, including the sacred nature of the individual in a spiritual context. He then follows up by showing us that this issue is right in front of us and we can't ignore it. He's acknowledging that right now, with the current decline of the church, we're already seeing extremists start to ask questions we never would have heard before, like how we know what a woman is and what's not. He's saying that as an example of the consequences of the decline of the church. He's not saying that this is the only reason he prescribed to Christian teachings, and nothing else in the series of clips you've dug up implies that Jordan Peterson feels that way. You are fascinating, Wisecracked. Absolutely fascinating. You display yourself as a fool in almost everything you say. You're living proof of the Proverbs 15:2 quote, "The tongue of the wise will dispense knowledge, but the mouth of fools will pour out folly."
And there's other clips where this happens too that I left out as well, where he'll weave this long circle just to come back to like, what is a woman? And there's a lot of theologians and biblical scholars who have written about gender and, queer theory and trans issues in relationship to this stuff. You can check that out if you want. But I just think he's kind of telling on himself there, and it makes me take everything he's saying a lot less seriously. And again, he wants to use, Christianity and faith as a guise for a type of, social exclusion, which personally, to quote Chief Keef.
Yeah, which is why in the first video you showed, he was encouraging the churches to bring young men back, to grow in their communities, and to continue doing the work of saving souls. Totally about social exclusion. Yep, you're totally not full of it, Wisecrack. How does anyone take you seriously? I don't even know. How does anyone take you seriously?
And it's actually the mysterious part of it that has to be retained. The virgin birth, the resurrection, the crucifixion, all of that crazy mythology, let's say, because otherwise it just degenerates into another form of cheap social justice. And don't we have enough of that?
So the point here, again, is that tradition, mythology, the virgin birth, all the big Catholic things are so important because if we don't have those, it all devolves into a cheap version of social justice, which seems to be showing again that he has no idea that social justice is inherently linked to that tradition and many theological traditions. But more importantly...
Wow, you said all that fast. Well, you're wrong. Christianity has nothing to do with this kind of social justice Peterson is talking about. You're trying to pretend like helping the poor and needy is the definition of social justice, but it's not. And you know this because you're getting on his case for his stance on LGBTQ issues, which has nothing to do with financially destitute people. The Bible is clear on both how to treat the poor and needy and also its stance on gender and relationships. Peterson has not said anything contradictory to the Bible. You, meanwhile, haven't even quoted the Bible. Look, I know I keep repeating this, but would you mind pulling out a Bible and actually reading it? It would give you so much more information to talk about, and you might even realize maybe Peterson has a few points.
It shows that, in my humble opinion, all he's doing here, and this is what he did, when he talked about postmodernism, right? Said all this stuff, misquote some philosophers.
Sorry. Hearing you accuse someone else of misquoting people smarter than yourself is very humorous to me. Carry on.
And at the end of the day, it's just to say, and that's why pronouns are bad. That's why social justice is bad, or whatever it might be. He discounts, Marx and talks about biology just to say that, gender norms are good and social justice is bad and yada yada. And he's doing the same thing here, right? He has a pattern. He takes a school of thought, he's doing the opposite. With postmodernism and Marxism, it's sort of let's make these into bad things to make sure that we're not getting social justice. And here, it's sort of like, let's make traditional Christianity a positive thing. Let's glob my thought onto that to have another fight against social justice. But I think it's kind of stupid because a lot of the things he's against are inherent in the very tradition. But, priests and theologians, get in the comments and let us know.
Well, I talked to my pastor about what you had to say, as well as my father, who is a deacon, and also my friend Jay, who is a well-educated Christian and my accountability partner in faith. And you know what they all said? They said, you clearly don't know what you're talking about, and I think I should also add here, Proverbs 17:28. We think even foolish people are wise if they keep silent. We think they understand what is right if they control their tongues. So, Wisecrack, do us all a favor and shut up. You'd look a lot better.
Okay, so that's all the clips we're watching. I promise, that's all. But I couldn't get through this whole video without checking out the tweets of one of the most prolific posters in the game, especially because last year Peterson opened up the Twitter app, and it was still Twitter then, to teach the Pope about Christianity. So let's end by looking at Twitter really quick, and then we'll get out of here. Pope Francis tweeted that social justice demands that we fight against the causes of poverty, inequality, and the lack of labor, land, and lodging, against those who deny social and labor rights, and against the culture that leads to taking away the dignity of others. And this is the sort of, tweet that those of us who grew up Catholic and then strayed a little bit are like, okay, that's pretty cool. Peterson jumps in and says, there is nothing Christian about social justice. Redemptive salvation is a matter of the individual soul. It was a bad impression, but it is what it was. But again, I don't want to go down this road too much. You can look all this sort of stuff up. But there are so many direct critiques of capitalism by the Catholic Church, and by, popes and stuff themselves.
Dude, really? You're throwing that up there for us to see and refusing to even discuss it or engage with it? What was wrong with that? Are you saying that because the Pope said this, it's the truth of Christian teaching? The Pope is not infallible. In fact, Pope Francis is one of the most unpopular popes in recent memory. His approval rating is poor amongst Catholics and non-Catholics alike, being only marginally better than his predecessor, Pope Benedict, and that doesn't account for all the Protestant Christians who do not take the Pope's word as anything more than face value anyway. What Peterson said is true. Redemptive salvation is a matter of our individual choice. We have to make a personal decision to reach salvation. Preaching about the importance of social justice is not the role or purpose of the church. How is Peterson wrong? Quote some biblical scripture at me or stop wasting my time.
Pope Benedict, who's one of the bad ones, he said capitalism encourages selfishness as men are concerned exclusively with what they should receive from society and unconcerned with what they can or should contribute to it. Almost like men just think they're supposed to grab a wife and take over society or whatever.
You keep bringing up how Jordan Peterson said that it's important for a man to find a wife and how the church encourages a man to seek out a wife, and you're saying that's bad. Didn't you say in a previous video you were married, bro? What is so bad about a man wanting to find a wife and Peterson encouraging men to seek a woman? It's biblical. Genesis 2:24. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife and they become one flesh. Peterson is referencing the Bible. You are mocking him for it. I think I know which of you two has a poor understanding of Christianity.
Pope Francis said, it is vital that government leaders and financial leaders take heed and broaden their horizons, working to ensure that all citizens have dignified work, education, and healthcare. The current Pope has critiqued trickle-down economics, all this sort of stuff. The only point here is that, to see Jordan Peterson come at the Pope and tell him how to do his job feels ridiculous. But again, it's also missing out that there's an inherent move for quote unquote social justice. If by that we mean a critique of capitalism, an emphasis on justice for the oppressed and the downtrodden, those sorts of things. It's all over the thing. So again, it just shows that he has an agenda. I think it's clear what the agenda is.
Do you want me to spell out what your agenda is, Wisecracked? I don't need to. Your agenda is as clear as day to anyone with a pair of eyes and 2 functioning brain cells to rub together. You are a political propagandist masquerading as a philosopher, and you shouldn't be trusted or taken seriously by anyone with common sense.
But yeah, so let's wrap up there.
Later that day.
Okay, actually, let's not wrap up there. It's Michael from the future in my home. I had to drop in because since we filmed this video, the Pope kind of screwed me. And I'll tell you why. Right after we filmed this, an article came out that showed that the Pope talked about how gender theory is an ugly ideology that threatens humanity, which makes him sound kind of like Peterson, which bummed me out. And then it got even worse when I started poking around and realized that he's been saying this stuff for a while. So I had to throw this in there to say that honestly, the Pope is saying things that are more aligned with some of the things that Peterson's talking about, and B, maybe the woke Pope isn't as woke or based as we thought he was. So let's get back to the rest. I think it still lands pretty well.
Ooh, so the Pope doesn't walk in lockstep with you and is now no longer based. Seeing as your entire thesis is based around the Catholic Church upholding your stance, this isn't a good look. Props for being big enough to admit it, but maybe that should have been your cue to stop. It only proves that you don't understand Christianity.
Okay, so like I said in my previous videos on Jordan Peterson, the point here was not to own Peterson or show that he's dumb or laugh at him.
And yet, that's exactly what you've been doing. Look at the clips.
He says, think again, sunshine. I'm going to just right now, I'm going to rewind 2 seconds so I can see him say it again.
Think again, sunshine.
Do it now. Quick question for everyone watching. You might notice that behind Jordan Peterson, there is a bunch of chopped wood Please let me know if you think that masculine powerhouse Jordan Peterson chopped that wood himself. Maybe our editors could even zoom in on that wood right now, and you can ask yourself if he chopped that wood. Right? It's to show that as a former academic and as a highly influential public intellectual, he has a responsibility to know what he's talking about.
I don't have anything to say here. I'm just going to let that irony float in the air a moment. Moving on.
And to speak not from a position of presumed authority, but as someone earnestly engaging with the traditions that he's writing and speaking about. And it seems that once again, Peterson is speaking incredibly confidently about a topic, Christianity, more specifically the theology and philosophy of Catholicism, that he doesn't really understand. And probably the best critique I read of Peterson's version of Christianity came from Daniel Burston, who writes that when Peterson talks about theological issues, he only invokes what Paul Tillich called the vertical or transcendental dimension of faith, the realm of transcendent and other or inner worldly concerns. The idea that religious faith must also be lived out in the world on the horizontal axis in the pursuit of peace and social justice never seems to cross his mind. I've talked about this throughout the video, and Burston just puts that so well, right? Peterson's faith is only one of a vertical relation to another world. And in leaving out the horizontal axis, he's missing the social, political, and intersubjective aspects of faith, which according to many are the whole point.
Then they are wrong. To love the world is to not love God. 1 John 2, 15 through 17. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. To love God, though, to seek God, to have a relationship with God, that is the whole point. John 14:21. Whoever has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. Jordan Peterson is talking about a vertical relationship with God because that is what God calls us to pursue, to yearn for, to strive for. This horizontal relationship with the world and social justice, as you call it, is a sham and a lie. You love others by loving God first. Love of the Lord will lead you to love others. You love others because you see the world through the eyes of God. 1 John 4, 7 through 8. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this nonsense about social justice, what social justice? Do you mean the love and care for the poor and needy, or do you mean to satisfy your personal sense of injustice and victimhood? We are called to love one another, not affirm one another. That is what Peterson takes issue with. Helping the poor is biblical. Helping the needy is biblical. Saving the desperate is biblical. But striving for equality, reforming the world, or conforming to it, where is that in the Bible? I have no idea, but I do know what it says in Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And you know what? I'm going to say this too. Any Wisecrack defenders who are about to hit me up in the comments saying that I should stop being a Bible beater, keep in mind, Wisecrack has stepped into the domain of theology, and they are judging Peterson by how well he understands it. So this comes with the territory. If you're going to talk about Scripture and claim someone doesn't understand it, expect people like me to go to the Bible.
So Burston goes on and writes that any serious student of the Bible knows that the prophetic call for justice is integral to the Judeo-Christian tradition, and its neglect by anyone intent on carrying this tradition forward is an omission that calls for serious reflection. And as Burston goes on to write, this is the aspect of faith that led Dietrich Bonhoeffer to try to take down Hitler, MLK Jr. to rally to abolish segregation and dismantle Jim Crow, and Catholic activists like Dorothy Day and the Berrigan brothers to commit acts of resistance and protest of the Vietnam War. Now, to be clear, this video is by no means some apology for religion, right? But, the examples of folks like Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther King Jr., and Dorothy Day are reminders that for many folks in that tradition, faith is about fighting for justice and equality in the here and now, and not an individualist moral system that says, make your bed, find your wife, conquer the land. Because when Peterson reduces Christianity to an individualist tale of adventure for young men wanting to actualize their power and wrangle a wife along the way, He's not just mischaracterizing a rich and complicated tradition. He's co-opting theological principles to justify his own specific neo-Darwinian view of reality. And it's worth noting, in researching this video, I read something from Sam Rocha, who is a philosophy professor at the University of British Columbia, and he said that Peterson's research on intelligence quotients is pseudoscientific, with links to 19th century race science and ethnoscience that gave rise to segregation. And as anyone familiar with the Abrahamic tradition knows, all these faiths are grounded in various senses of community, and in many ways involve challenging and expanding one's community. Now that's why Jacques Derrida, who's one of Peterson's big nemeses, develops his theory of absolute hospitality in conversation with Judaism, and why folks from Thomas Müntzer to Martin Luther King Jr. to the Latin American liberation theologians rightly considered the primary ethical call of Christianity to pertain to creating communities of justice. It's also why lots of non-religious philosophers, from Ernst Bloch to Alain Badiou to Slavoj Žižek, have positively utilized the aspect of Christianity in their work, as they see a liberatory potential that prioritizes community over individual interest. As Ernst Bloch writes in his book, Atheism and Christianity, the point, however, to be made against all pseudo-enlightenment, which sees religion as a spent force caught between Moses and Darwin, is this: the counterblow against the oppressor is biblical too, and that is why it has always been suppressed or distorted from the serpent on. It was the counterblow that gave the Bible its popularity and its appeal.
This quote confuses me. The counterblow to the oppressor is biblical. Are we reading the same Bible? What verse are you thinking of? Because the first one I think of is Romans 12:19. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. Revenge, countering the oppressor by that logic, is not biblical. In fact, it's antithetical. I want to know what you're referring to. Wait, you will say from the serpent onward. Are you saying that the serpent was the counterblow to the oppressor, that God was the oppressor and the serpent was the counterblow, and it's been covered up this whole time? What are you saying? Could we get what book are you writing? You know what, Wisecrack, what book is this from? What writing is this from? I'd like to read it. In fact, hold on. Let me just look up this guy. Ernst Bloch, you said? Let me look him up. Oh, he's a Marxist philosopher. Big shock. Wait. So was that liberation theology you touted? Are you kidding, man? You only draw from people and speakers who only support your Marxist ideology? Damn, I'd say I'm surprised, but nah, makes sense. Makes sense. You live in an echo chamber, so you're only going to quote people who live in it with you.
But it seems like what Peterson's doing is taking a faith with a clear social ethic, one which always uses its transcendent orientation to facilitate horizontal action, and he turns it into an individualist enterprise where God exists solely to help young men become Joseph Campbell's archetypal hero. And there's lots of issues here, but two of the most important ones as I see it are that Peterson is using his position of authority to preach a mischaracterized version of Christianity aimed at young men searching for meaning and purpose, and second, that in doing so, all he's really doing is using the guise and authority of Christian theology to add divine legitimacy to his own form of kind of reactionary conservative thought. So if you've been watching and reading Peterson's work on religion, I would simply encourage you to do what he hasn't taken the time to do and do some reading for yourself, whether it's the Bible or the works of philosophers like Augustine, Aquinas, Kierkegaard, or contemporary theologians and philosophers of religion. Just go read some stuff.
He read the Bible at the very least, unlike you.
But before we go, I want to give the last word to Peterson in an act of humility and grace.
Think again, sunshine.
No, you're not here to make fun of him or call him stupid. You're not here to do that. You're just going to end your video by mocking him again. Not end this video. I'm done with it. Okay. I'm done with this video. Guys, this may be the worst Wisecrack video I've ever looked at. It really did irritate me, and I had to really control myself. Me and Lark, when we watched it together, were so angry. We actually couldn't respond to it right away. We had to give ourselves time to calm down. It made us so mad. Because here's the thing. We are Christians. Me and Lark are both Christians. We are both saved. And Jordan Peterson is someone we actually really respect. Not because of his faith, but because he's an intellectual. He's very intelligent. I've read 2 of his books. He seems to really understand a lot of what he's talking about. Now, I don't agree with him on everything he says. And to be perfectly honest, I'd love to sit down with Jordan Peterson someday and just really talk about the Bible, talk about faith, and really understand where he's coming at it from, because I think it would open my eyes to a lot of things and hopefully open his eyes to a lot of things. I pray for his soul. I pray that one day he fully does accept Jesus Christ and convert, and that would be phenomenal. I would be so happy to hear that. But here's the thing. When Wisecrack says that Jordan Peterson doesn't understand Christianity, my first thought is, okay, how are you going to prove that? Because I can think of a few ways you could prove that. Take what Jordan Peterson says, his stances, his opinions, his touting, and compare it to Scripture. Because the Bible is the unquestionable holy book for Christians. Christians should look to the Bible first and foremost for direction. So, if Jordan Peterson doesn't understand Christianity, then the ultimate way to prove it is to hold up what he says and what he thinks to what the Bible has to say. And if you find contradictions, you find your answer. So that was what I thought we would do, Wisecrack. I thought you were going to whip out the Bible and actually show me where Jordan Peterson gets things wrong. But that was hoping for too much. You never once opened the Bible. You never once quoted it. In fact, you showed a few times here you didn't understand what the Bible was saying when Jordan Peterson quoted it. In fact, you were so desperate to avoid the Bible that when Jordan Peterson brought up the Beatitudes and brought up the blessing of the poor of spirit, instead of bringing up that verse or talking about the verse in context or bringing up other commentators, you went to liberation theology, a sect of Christianity that I wouldn't even consider truly Christian. But that's a different debate. And I thought, okay, so maybe you'll go to their commentary on the Scripture. Nope. You just brought up a random quote that they said about taking care of poor people and spreading social justice. It has nothing to do with the quote that Jordan Peterson's talking about. You basically slander him throughout the video. You mock him at certain points while also claiming you're not trying to mock him. You disrespect him and other people who agree with him. And you constantly say, oh, well, look at this, guys. I'm looking at Catholic sources. I'm looking at Christian sources. I'm meeting him where he is. Why aren't you going to the Bible? And I'll tell you why. Because Wisecrack knows that if they were to go to the Bible, they would be proven incompetent. They would be proven wrong. I know this because for the past several years, Christianity has been held as some kind of evil, archaic, outdated belief system. People calling Christians evil or wrong or stupid or superstitious. Now all of a sudden, Wisecrack is here saying, no, actually Christianity touts social justice. Where was that this whole time? I've never heard that sermon. Jordan Peterson is trying to tell the churches. I'm going to tell you what Jordan Peterson's been doing. He's trying to tell churches, stop focusing on the needs of the world and focus on the needs of the soul. Your mandate is to save souls. The Great Commission of Jesus was to go out and make disciples of all nations, to save lives, to save souls, to bring them to God, not to bring equality to the masses, not to affirm people's sensibilities, not to stop global warming. That's not your mandate. That's not your goal. Your goal as a church is to save souls, to bring people to Christ. And that's what he said. And Wisecrack just can't handle it. This video was atrocious. I tried my best to be as respectful as I could. I really did. There were moments I wanted to rage, but I tried to control myself. I hope that you guys got through this video okay. I know it was a super long one, and I do apologize. I'm done now. I'll go ahead and go. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Take care.